Great. I think we are ready here. Hopefully everybody can hear us. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. For those of you I've not had the chance to meet, my name is Abby Hammer, and I am the Chief Customer Officer here at Churn Zero. I truly appreciate everybody taking the time out of what I know are super busy schedules right now to attend this panel. I think I speak for everyone when I say that the last few weeks have been a bit strange. I'm sure many of you feel like I do, a bit like you're trying to build a plane while it's already in the air. And so for that reason, we think it's really important to pull together as a group of CS leaders and support one another. None of us have weathered a pandemic before, so as we move through uncharted territory, I'm really encouraged to see how our community is already, pulling together, reaching out, offering advice, giving support, and we want to be participatory in that process as much as we can. Now more than ever, customer success is really critical to our businesses making it through this uncertain time. I want to say a huge thank you to our panelists for volunteering their time and ideas and energy today. I'm going to have each of them introduce themselves, but I want to briefly do a couple of housekeeping items before we dive into that. So, though we do have the 3 panelists plus myself, we do want this conversation to be as interactive as possible. If you have questions, if you have ideas or advice to share of your own, I strongly encourage you throughout the conversation today to drop your ideas or questions into the Q&A section of the Zoom meeting. And you'll find that if you hover over the Zoom meeting, you'll find that towards the bottom. I'm going to be watching that as we go through today and try to make sure that as we have questions, I voice those. As we have advice, I bring that up as well. I'm also going to make a recommendation that if you hover over the Zoom towards the upper right, there's a speaker view versus a gallery view. And you might want to switch to the speaker view just so that it's a little easier to, it's not going to flip around as much as we're all talking. And last but not least, I will say we are recording, so we will send this out at the end in case people are unable to attend today or you'd like to share this with some other team members, you'll be able to do that. I think that's all of our housekeeping. So I want to go ahead and give each of our panelists an opportunity to introduce yourselves. I'm asking each of them to, tell you their name and where they're at, and then also to give us maybe a 2 to 3 sentence description of how the situation has impacted your business thus far. You're going to hear we have a bit of a spectrum in terms of what's happening with these, with these couple of businesses. So I think that should give a lot of people on the phone a lot of variety, and you might find yourself aligning more closely with where one or the other panelists are at. So with that, Jeremy, I'm going to nominate you to go first, if you don't mind.
Sounds good. So hello, everybody. Thanks for joining today. My name is Jeremy Jeffers. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Untapped. We are a social media app for the craft beer industry. So our customer base is it's thousands of small businesses across the world in the service industry, bars, restaurants, breweries, alcohol retail. So pretty firmly in the crosshairs of the restrictions and social isolation policies of COVID-19. So it's been an interesting couple of weeks for us.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it. And thank you for being here today. Kris, you want to give us a little intro?
Sure. Again, thank everybody for joining and for having me. My name is Kris Morrison. I'm the VP of Customer Success at Interact Software, and we're effectively an intranet company. And so, as I'm sure you can imagine, there's a sort of interesting sort of challenge, I guess, that we're facing, where in one regard or one side of things, we have a customer base that's facing all the same challenges as probably your customers are, but we have an opportunity because largely what we're focused on is helping these businesses communicate with their employees. And so in this period of let's face it, it's sort of this unprecedented uncertainty. In this period of unprecedented uncertainty, we have an opportunity to help not only our existing customers but also some new businesses. And so we have this sort of, three things that are happening in our business. One, there's this sort of dichotomy between, different industries. So clearly retailers are having a very, very different experience than, healthcare providers. And so, we're trying to tailor our approaches to handle that. But what we've also discovered is that, what normally takes about 3 to 4 months to onboard customers, mainly because we take a really strategic sort of engaging let's make sure that we've thought through all the governance, all the different components of this. And we've taken that and said, look, we're going to help you guys launch in, less than 2 weeks. And we've already had several folks do that just to try and get that crisis communications set up and out there. So yeah, it's definitely been an interesting few weeks. And I'm only 3 weeks into this new role. I was previously with Consumer Affairs, so it's been a heck of an onboarding process.
I was going to say, wild time to get started, Kris. Wild time. Thank you. And Ashley, why don't you go ahead and intro for us, please?
Hey everyone, my name is Ashley. I'm here in Seattle, Washington, and I am the Director of Customer Experience at Pipeline Deals. So we are a sales enablement software. So we're already seeing an impact as customers of ours are facing sales team layoffs, unfortunately. But we also have kind of a somewhat of an advantage to be there as really an aid for these companies and really just help them brace for some of the economic impact that they're up against. And so we're up for the challenge, but it's very, very scary times.
For sure. And I think, I'll put a blanket statement out there for myself, but I'm sure the other panelists will agree. What we know each and every day changes, so I'm thinking about what I thought this time last week versus what I think now. So it's a very evolving situation, and so the advice we're going to give today is, where we're at right now, and I'm sure it will continue to grow. So with that in mind, when I was thinking about what I thought would make sense to talk about today, I think one of the interesting things is we've seen customers here at Churn Zero react to this scenario, as COVID-19 has spread in different parts of the world, even in different parts of the US, we've seen our customers sort of be in various stages of planning and execution of their plans. So for those that have joined us today who are maybe a little bit earlier in that process, I'd like to start by saying, when the situation really became clear that it was going to be impactful, I'd love to get an idea from all three of you about what were your first steps to shaping how you were going to respond, knowing your customer base, knowing your product, sort of what was the foundation of what has now become, the start of your responses. And someone can self-nominate to go first, or I can call on someone.
I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ashley.
So, what's, I guess, unique about us just being here in Seattle is in Washington, it felt like overnight, we just had so many cases. And so, I got an email from our CEO on a Sunday night, which doesn't always happen, thankfully. And it was just, we need to be ready for this. And we need to just start thinking about a plan of attack, because we know that as it's already going to be affecting us in our daily life here in Washington, it's only soon going to follow for all of our customers. And so, that was just the first immediate red flag for us, when it was no longer just this distant fear and it was over here in these countries. It's like, wow, that's only 20 minutes away, is this, nursing facility out in Kirkland, Washington. So it was really immediate, because I think we all have to acknowledge that time is of the essence. So.
Yeah, and I'll say for us, Untapped as a brand is pretty global at this point, and that follows through to our customer base as well. So really less so in Asia, but as it started coming into Europe a little bit more prevalent and started impacting Italy, it really popped on our radar as, okay, we need to be in communication with our customers. And that first step for us was, while we're trying to figure out what's going on, it's having to communicate with our customers, because different countries, different cities, different states are handling it the same way, or different ways rather. So that first wave is, we're picking up the phone and calling you as a part of our normal operation to do business, but we're certainly going to ask the question, hey, how is this being handled in your area? And just doing that information gathering across the organization. So a lot of collaboration between sales and success for, hey, we just heard that, Holland is handling it this way. We just got word, no major impacts in Germany just yet. So that's still an area that's under, normal operations. And it just kind of spread in pockets from there. But that internal communication around, hey, what do we know about which areas, which geos right now was very, very crucial for us.
And Jeremy, I'd love it if you speak a little bit about, as you isolated an impacted region, you and I have talked about what you guys have decided to do, but how did you guys work to, maybe tell us where you've gotten to, but how you guys actually worked to that as the correct answer, as the next step forward?
Sure. So it just started with some simple, hey, we need to keep our eyes on this. So let's do some, tagging and some account fields in Salesforce as we're calling people. And then as we get word that, hey, this city just shut itself down, let's give it that temporary do not call flag. That would update across the network, whether it's for prospects or for customers. But then very quickly, and this was a good opportunity for us to kind of use churn zero in this instance to help kind of guide the next steps forward. We just started looking at the activity inside of our app. So as we started to monitor, login events or, other crucial, events inside of our app that signify, hey, this business is probably open for business if these events are occurring. We started tracking trends down to the geolocation to see, okay, hey, we're seeing a huge decrease in this region or in this state. It looks like that one might have just gotten shut down. Similarly, we're trying to set up the tracking now for the reverse direction. So as we start to see over the next few weeks, maybe a few months, hopefully, businesses start to be able to open back up, noticing those upticks in trends of, hey, customers that hadn't been logging in over the last 3 weeks started firing up activity again. And doing as much of it as we can without always having to call our customers. We're still in close contact with our customers right now, but any edge we can get where the activity inside the app's actually going to signal to us the direction things are moving, that's a big benefit to us.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I love the idea of using usage as maybe a leading indicator that there might be a customer in crisis. Kris, let's hear a little bit from you. As the last couple of weeks have evolved, talk to me about how you guys have formulated your strategy about how you're going to communicate with customers.
Yeah, so we're as an organization, we're international. We have customers in Europe, throughout Europe, heavily in the UK because we're actually a UK-based company initially, and then obviously across the US and over to Australia and New Zealand. And so, we started to see it within the European market a little bit earlier than obviously in the US. And, actually, we took the approach first off of putting together this working group internally that looked at our own employees and said, how do we communicate to our own employees? And so we looked at that and we sort of came together and said, we're going to look at this in different stages. So stage 0, stage 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And so we clearly defined that, if you get to this stage, we're going to close the office, or we're going to get to this stage and it's going to be recommended work from home. And what that necessitated was each team then coming up with this sort of business continuity plan. As part of that business continuity plan, it was, how are we going to communicate with customers? What happens if one of us gets sick? What happens? Who's going to handle those accounts, etc. And then we, within our individual orgs, we then started to say, right, how do we segment this? How do we communicate to these people? I think we did what everybody did in the first week or two, which was, we started blasting out these COVID-19 emails. And I was just reading on Facebook before we got on here, and a friend of mine's talking about, I've figured out how to block all emails that have COVID-19 in them. And I think a lot of what's coming out of that is, folks are saying, look, if I think the example he gave was, JCPenney's doing X and Y to look after the retail staff. And oh, by the way, if you want 40% clearance prices, and I don't really care about that. Whereas, somebody else is saying, well, look, my mortgage provider reached out and said, look, if you need to delay your payment, give us a call at this number. And, I think that mirrors kind of what we've went through, which is, how do we, we started off with how do we communicate this? How do we handle this? How do we say, look, we have clients in retail, we have clients in travel, we have clients in manufacturing. We need to be a little bit more sensitive to that than otherwise. And for me, coming in as a new VP in this organization, I was sort of looking at it and going, well, what can we do better? What can we fix? What can we change? And it really quickly changed to, you know what, it's roll the sleeves up. We're going to need to do whatever we can to get through this. And the approach that we've chosen to take is, doesn't matter about economics at this point in time. The economics will come. The short term is, how do we provide value to these people? And that ties back into, not just sending that sort of standard COVID-19 email. It's, how do we touch these people? How do we reach out to these people and provide something that's maybe a little bit unique, but will help them get through this?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point around. I think all of us are experiencing a bit of email fatigue. I feel like every business I've ever interacted with in the last 3 years, I I know how they're handling this situation now. I think in something as unprecedented as this, as humans, maybe our first instinct is to communicate. Just to say like, hey, we're aware, we're trying to do things. So I do want to talk about customer communication. Before we go to that, though, Kris, I want to come back to one point that you brought up because it's been helpful on our side as well. Um, here at Turn Zero, we talk a lot about customer segmentation and the importance of it, and helping give your customers the right information at the right time. Something we've suggested that we've seen a lot of customers do and that we have done ourselves is have a special segmentation strategy around this crisis. Because a customer who was perfectly healthy beforehand, very actively engaged, may now be experiencing something very different. In fact, I'll call out Jeremy and Untapped is a perfect example of that. Very active users of our system, but a customer we need to approach in a much different way because of the special impact to their own customers. So I think I love that you guys took that approach and said, hey, we probably need to do some special work on segmentation. Let's actually talk a bit about customer engagement, because I think that's one thing that's at the front of everybody's mind. We don't want to be silent. We want our customers to know that we're here and that we want to be supportive, but I think there is a real danger of fatigue. So Ashley, let's start with you maybe around customer communication. Like, how do you think it needs to change during this crisis? So like when you guys think about what you're going to talk to your customers about, how is it morphing and changing from what may have been your typical communication patterns?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good question that we should all be thinking about. And I think it actually starts with our internal teams. So, for all of us internally, there's so much fear. And I think handling, morale, all of those things are so crucial right now. And also just bracing our teams for the right messaging to our customers has been really, really important. I just got off our leadership team meeting here about 20 minutes ago. And, that was really the sentiment. We not only want to be here for our customers, but we want to have the right messaging go out, and we want to lead with that value that we want to continue to provide, and really just that availability that we're here for them. So we're actually, we're kind of scrambling a little bit to make updates even to our billing page, so that if somebody was to go as far as requesting an account cancellation, we want to raise our hand and be like, we're here for you. We have options. But we also need to think of newer ways, I think, of just being proactive and getting ahead of all of the foreseeable churn and contraction that we're all kind of just bracing for. So we're having to just reevaluate the certain triggers that we have set up right now in Turn Zero, whether it is looking at their account usage and just all of those indications of churn and contraction. And I know today at our team meeting, like, it's still just such a work in progress. And I know we're just going to be, discussing how we want to proactively reach out to these guys. So,
yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Jeremy, I know you guys did the same thing. It sounds like Ashley's team did, was like, hey, let's look at what's going out right now. And maybe there are some things we need to turn off, communications that would have made sense 3 weeks ago that now are going to do the opposite of helping. Maybe talk to us about that a bit.
Yeah, very quickly we realized that if we were sending out our normal, automation for kicking off the renewal cycle or our onboarding journeys, it would come off as pretty tone deaf. And we got some very early feedback on that in some of those leading markets of even just noticing like, hey, we noticed you haven't started your account yet. And you get that snide like, well, yeah, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And it's like, yep, nope, we know that. Sorry, we got to turn that off. So adjusting to that was really quick. And then, I like what Ashley said there about making sure that the internal teams are aligned with what that messaging is so that everybody can then move quicker for the customers. One of the early decisions we made, and we're still in the midst of this and moving it out just because of how broad the impact is to our customer base is, okay, next few weeks of renewals, and we're very heavily reliant on auto renewal cycles, things like that. We're at about 18,000 customers across 9 CSMs. So that's a big component of our business. But we knew that already panic was starting when people get, their 72-hour warning that this is coming through and things like that. So we waived those out a couple months and set it aside, but we didn't just stop there, and we didn't do, you guys mentioned the email fatigue. For that reason, it was really important for us. I told my CSMs like, hey, drop everything else. Your priority now is you're going to make phone calls to every single one of those customers that we just moved their renewal date and let them know that we proactively extended their service to get it beyond. And you have to make that phone call because they're voicing out the renewals. And frankly, I think the team needed it a little bit, because to make that phone call and hear the sense of relief and gratitude on that side for the customers kind of got everybody bought in on, hey, this is the mission. The mission right now is to be focused on our customers. Like Kris said, we can put the billing side of it, the economic side of it, as down the line, and we'll make that work. But to be here for our customers right now is crucially important.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, Kris, I'm interested in a question just came in. A reminder, everybody, you can put questions or thoughts and things like that into the Q&A section. A question came in that Kris, you alluded to, and now Jeremy's brought up is, for Jeremy's group, it was very important to do that proactive communication, because you guys knew 100% we have an impacted community. Like, there's no question about that. For some of us that are maybe a little bit more in the muddy middle, where it's like, yeah, everybody's going to be impacted in the sense that we're looking at a huge, we're looking at a lot of questions around the economy. But I know something that's out there is it better let customers contact us, or is it better for us to contact customers? Are we inviting maybe worry where we don't want to if we were to proactively reach out, or are we missing the boat if we wait too long, and someone's already made a decision about something? I know that's something we're actively talking about here at Turn Zero as well. So Kris, I'm interested in your take on that, between the waiting for people to come to you versus proactively going to them.
Yeah, it's a really difficult question to answer. It's a really difficult question. It's a really difficult one to get right. We took a similar approach, actually, to I guess you guys are doing, which is, I alluded to earlier, we had this sort of more targeted approach in certain segments. Mm-hmm. So within retail, etc. Yeah, we proactively reached out to some of those guys. Within travel, we proactively reached out to some of those customers and said, look, how can we help you here? The other thing that we did was we then started to put together these emails that was effectively like a care package. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually what we put as the subject of the email. It's just a care package. And a lot of the stuff, historically, in marketing materials and the things that we've shared in the past have been, things that, ultimately are tied to, can we get an upsell out of this? Can we get an expansion? Can we do these things? And what we've sort of said is, look, it's just, this doesn't matter if you're a customer or not. This is going to help you. This is something that we think will help. And then we started doing webinars. We've done a lot of webinars, and the engagement, we were just talking about it before we got on here. I think I see, we've got hundreds of folks on this webinar, and I think a lot of that's coming from the fact that people are working from home, and it's just a different thing. It's just different. It's a different way of doing things. So I think the answer from my perspective is it depends. It depends on the customer base. It depends on someone like the health service in the UK. Yeah, we're reaching out to them, but the communication that we're reaching out to them with is just a little bit different. The other thing that we're doing, which is similar to what Jeremy mentioned, and alludes to this concept of, look, we're not as interested in the economics, and that's an interesting balance as well, right? Because we're all a business here. We're all businesses, and we all need capital. We all need revenue to kind of keep us going through this period. But we've started looking at flexibility of payment as well, and saying, look, one of the levers that I have is available to me is to say to these guys, instead of yes, your renewal is due and it's an annual payment, and it's due on April 1st. You know what? We'll give you 60 days to pay it. So we'll do net 60 terms, or we will allow you to pay it in quarterly or monthly. And I think just that little pieces of flexibility, showing that you understand that, their business, I think that plays a part. If you're just going to reach out to somebody and as we talked about earlier, and talk about your COVID-19 plan and how you're washing your offices a little bit more regularly and you're emptying the bins a little bit more regularly and stuff like that, it's probably not going to add the value that you hope to see.
Yeah, there's two important points there, Kris. And Ashley, I think you might have a point on that one. I think I'm about to prompt you with the same thought you're having. So go for it, please.
Yeah, so one thing that we implemented last week that I think is already proving to be very successful is we actually isolated our smaller to medium-sized businesses who are customers of ours, and we did just give like a pretty large handful of our customers a free upgrade to our top tier. through the end of September, because we also aren't, so keen on the economic side, but we just want to do what we can to retain those guys. And I mean, I swear, since we've turned on that messaging and upgraded them, we've had so many people just reach out and be like, this is one of the reasons we love you guys. And this is gonna, that added feature is gonna actually help us stay in communication with our customers through this hard time. So yeah, just putting your money where your mouth is and just doing something. It didn't cost us anything also to do that, which was awesome.
Yeah, I think acts of generosity are going really far. That people want to everybody's feeling personally afraid. So feeling like a vendor cares about what happens to you during this time. It's not just lip service. I think it really matters. And I've heard a lot of our customers talk about creativity around the financial side of it. I love the idea of a free upgrade. Kris, I love your ideas of saying, hey, let's push out payment terms, or let's let you do it in chunks. I think in general, I'm seeing that most people are saying, if we are committed to customer success long term, in theory, there is another side of this. There's a light at the end of this tunnel. So what do we do, around pricing to make people feel like they want to be with us in the long term? Any disagreements with that, guys? Is there anywhere where you think, nah, it's worth holding the line on certain types of things, or are we feeling like we're in a period of, better to err on the side of too generous than not generous enough?
I think from my perspective, just to kind of follow up on what I said, I think it ties to one of the questions. It's one of those tricky issues where, yes, I think we should be flexible in terms of the levers. I think we should be flexible in terms of, the areas that we can be. But, we're not making a huge margin. And then obviously that depends on your business, etc. I think that you then, if you are making a huge margin and you decide to go discount, then you have to then look at what does this mean 3 months from now, 6 months from now, or however long it takes to come out of this. But I do think that it's, largely speaking, if you believe in your product and you believe in the value that you're delivering, if it doesn't cost you anything, I think that's a slightly different scenario where you can give the upgrades, etc. But for us, we're certainly not. One of the terms we've used, or we've I don't know if it's coined it or whatever, but we don't want to be pandemic profiteers. We're not trying to profit off of a pandemic. We are trying to help people through this process. But part of that is that, again, we're a business too. We at the end of this, I think we're all having the same worries. Am I going to have a job here in 3 months' time? And so largely, it's like how for us, it's we're going to be fair on those terms. We're going to bend as much as we possibly can, but we can't just give this away because then we're losing money and we're not a charity. And it's just a really fine balance.
I think that's fair. I think also, I see some people, customers have expressed to us that their customers are asking for pauses, which is something, as a customer success person, I think a pause is sometimes what a customer might express because I think it's going to give them some relief. But I'm always really anxious about letting a customer step away from a solution and get time away from a solution unless it's absolutely necessary, obviously. So, I love creative ideas that people have been coming up that say, how can we keep you involved with the product and keep you involved with the value even during this time? I want to loop back around to a topic we sort of started down the pathway, and then we started to talk about the finances side of it. So we've got some people coming in on the question side that are saying, hey, phone's really hard for us right now. No one's in the office. We only have, office numbers. So email's kind of our only option here. Ashley, maybe we start with you on this one. So if someone has email as their only opportunity to talk to a customer, or is email really the only opportunity to talk to a customer? Like, I love you guys upgrading your billing page, for example. That's another way to talk to a customer. But if that's your main source of communication, what's your advice on how to make sure that just, doesn't get deleted very quickly, given all the noise that's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've definitely had to fine tune, those messages, because again, we want to send the right message too. So I think it's just about striking a balance. I love, Jeremy, what you mentioned earlier, putting a pause to other messages as well, so that also in translation becomes front and center. That's actually just a reminder for me to just follow up on that. But, I would say there's nothing wrong with email. And hopefully if you've built a solid relationship with your customers, they know to look out for your email anyways. I think even just getting, like, if you can, your CEO, like a message out from him, because although maybe it's not just this broad statement of here's what we're doing in response to this, but you know, here's kind of, maybe it's more specific, here's more of an offer or something. When they see that it's coming from maybe even your CEO, I mean, that could also just go quite a long ways. But yeah, I think we have to be creative with, you know, just changing around our app, just these other areas in which we know our customers are looking to reach out to us in, you know, a really quick way. We also are pretty unique in that, you know, we have a 1-866 number that our customers can call into at any point. So they're actually being really proactive, and we've heard a lot from our customers right now. So I think that's just our edge right now. And they can also chat and email with us. So if they need something, we're right there. But I know not everybody's that fortunate. So I'd have to say email is absolutely just going to be the next best solution.
Yeah, so Ashley, it sounds like your advice there is, you know, if you're going to communicate in email or in anything, it should really be focused around that value, you know, like, and that's true, quite frankly. We all know that that's true of good customer success, even when we're not in a global crisis. You know, when you talk to someone, one of my biggest pet peeves is CSMs that call just to check in. Like, that's, you know, that's not a good use of anyone's time. We should always have a purpose and a focus that's on our customer when we communicate. You know, Jeremy, I know things are a bit different for you guys right now because you are in a bit of a, you know, a stop point right now. But as you guys think about maybe a couple of months from now, as things start to come back online, I'm sure you guys are already starting to plan, like, how do we reinforce value? How do we help these businesses get back up on their feet after what would have been a rough period? So maybe talk us through what you're thinking and planning there.
Yeah, and there's a couple things, and a part of it's already started. I liked what you said, Abby, earlier, that we never want to encourage a full disconnect with it. And I've said the same with my team. You know, we've had people say, hey, our business is closed for the next 3 months. Like, can we pause it? Okay, cool. Yeah, you can. You'd be stepping away. You know, what can we do in the meantime? And so we've tried to get really creative with our ideas around, well, can we help you with social engagement right now? You know, your business is closed, but could you be doing digital happy hours with your customers? Could you be doing, you know, virtual concerts or whatever, you know, with people right now? And then additionally, just a short plug for ourselves for something that we spun up really quickly. You know, I'm sure a lot of you guys have all seen the big push for, you know, support your local businesses, order delivery, order takeout, do it responsibly, but do those things. Well, we leaned into that because those are our customers that are trying to get that message out. And in the span of, you know, 48, 60 hours, spun out a new product that is basically just a reference page called, it's Greg's List, named after our owner. And it's just a list of, here's all of the venues in your area. Are they open? Are they doing delivery? Are they doing pickup right now? So that there's a reason of, yes, you know, business, you may have had to shutter your doors right now, and sending, you know, push notifications to people that follow your venue about what draft lines you have is not as critical at this moment. But list your information on this up to and including, you know, your beer menu of beers that you're selling out the door, or, you know, food that you're offering up for delivery. And that's just ways to use our product, maybe slightly different than you were using it 2 months ago, but to still stay engaged, and still stay connected to our community.
Yeah, that's great. You know, the same message, the message is a little different for you guys, but there is still value. I think there's something really interesting in trying to say, okay, we still want to talk about value, but it's probably tweaked a little bit. Kris, for your customers that when this really sort of took hold in the last few weeks that were more in the implementation phase, and maybe let's focus on the ones that are in industries that are being a little harder hit, how have you guys tried to maintain momentum with those customers, you know, who are at a particularly pivotal time? You know, as a customer coming on board, maybe doesn't have full value realized yet. And so you're trying to keep that motivation high when there's lots of competing priorities.
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and if I may, I just to add on the previous question, you know, one of the other things that are ways that I would encourage you to think about, especially if you're a Churn Zero customer, is this concept of the in-app notifications, because I think that, and obviously that's only for a segment of your customers, right? And I think what you're getting back to when you start to think about, you know, these disengaged customers, these folks that are using it or not using it, you're really asking yourself, are you an essential part of their operations? If you're an essential part of their operations and they're going to continue using you throughout this period, then the in-app notifications can become, can be really useful. You know, I think as far as, you know, one other thought there that we found to be interesting is, again, when we think about how we're going to help people, one of the things that we've done is reached out to customers that have either churned in the past 12 months or who have given notice, right? Because who wants to be going through this process, in the middle of things and ripping this out and trying to find a new provider and trying to work with IT when everybody's working in a different way. So we found that to be interesting, and it kind of ties into this concept of implementation. So one of the things that, our typical implementation can last anywhere from 3 to 9 months. And it's a really in-depth onboarding process because, we're going on site with these guys. We have a strategy team that, we work with them on governance. We work with them on, site architecture. Again, we're an intranet. So, there's a lot of different departments. There's a lot of different stakeholders. And what we have said is, you know what, we're going to, right now, most people don't really care about, blogs, or they don't necessarily care about, some of the other features that we have, but they do care about crisis communications. And so what we've said to these customers in onboarding is, look, we know that you want to go live with all these things, but we also know this is unprecedented. So how about we look at adjusting the scope to get you live so you can start to realize some of this value as quickly as possible. And we've also done that on the new business front. So we've kind of come up with this new model where, for new business, we're saying to these guys, you know what, we can get you up and live in less than 2 weeks with a basic framework that allows you to communicate. It's also meant that, we have this new feature which we refer to as magic links. Well, magic links are basically allow you to send out an email with a link to log in without the necessity of syncing with Active Directory and all this other stuff. And so, we weren't going to launch that for another 2 months. We went to product and said, look, this is a unique situation. Can you help us get this to market much quicker? And so we paused some of our roadmap because it wasn't relevant right here and now. And so that's meant that, I know that's a really roundabout answer, but, we basically, what we have done is we've taken, what's important to people now and prioritize that in order to generate the, to get these people live and to see, help them see value as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, Kris, is, sure, we are here as customer success people, but we are all also working with a product. And, when we talk about the entire team being involved in a response to this, Ashley, you'd alluded to, your leadership meetings and things like that. I think product stepping in, what could they be doing to maybe help relieve some pressure here? Ashley, I think you mentioned that, there's some thought going into how your new business messaging is going out to make sure that there's a consistency in this. We're here for you. We understand, and here's what our value is in this specific sort of point in time. Actually, I'm curious, are you guys doing more frequent leadership meetings in order to stay on top of the situation?
That's a good question. So yeah, as of today, at 1 p.m. Pacific every day, we will be having daily stand-ups to discuss our customers' usage, and also to just look at the accounts that are contracting and leaving. Because we do want to stay on top of it. We have to. As a company, we have to understand if there's any key learning from any of it. And we also have to just hold ourselves accountable. So yeah, daily stand-ups is really what we're going to do for the foreseeable future until we feel more comfortable about just the situation we're in.
Sure. Jeremy, Kris, we're doing daily leadership stand-ups here. I assume it's the same for you guys as well?
Yeah, a lot more communication on that front, and it's trickling down to the teams as well. So, more daily breakouts as a team as we, lean into being Slack and Zoom centric. And I'm sure all of you are in some similar combination, but it's important to keep those. You alluded to it earlier, Abby. Things are changing every hour, much less every day. So to have those channels open and those opportunities to catch up, that's been really, really important.
Yeah, let's actually dig in a little bit there. We're all people who lead teams, those of us that are here, but then also, others that are attending. we have teams and where everybody's concerned and a little scared, I'm sure. You know, Ashley, you talked about morale beforehand, like how do you keep that high? So I'd love to hear some ideas about how you keep communication within the entire company consistent and, you know, and clear, so that everybody at least understands, while it may not be a pretty picture in front of us and it might be a scary picture, they at least feel like, you know, they have an understanding of what's going on. So I'm curious on things that have worked well for you guys to communicate with the broader team.
Yeah, I mean, Slack it can be, you know, very useful. It can also be a bit of a distraction. But, you know, we're using Slack at this time, you know, while we're all remote, to just go into our team room, and, you know, we throw out what our top priority is for today, you know, any good news, any pain points. That's just been really crucial. But I think as a leadership team, we're also just trying to stay really positive within Slack and even Zoom when we do meet with people. And we're just trying to focus on the things that we can control, and then hopefully let that trickle down to, you know, everybody else, because there is just so much uncertainty right now. And so I'm also just urging, you know, some of the people that are under me to just stay informed, but also just don't get so immersed in the news and every day-to-day moment that just changes, that you can't focus on, you know, the value that you bring to your customers and even to the rest of your team. So Zoom is just so helpful. You know, we can always stay connected. Us on the leadership team, we're being really deliberate about scheduling one-on-ones with at least 3 people that we wouldn't normally speak to each week, so that we can just stay connected, because, you know, just a lot of the remote changes are really forcing us to have, you know, really tightened up communication habits.
Yeah, I love that, because, you know, when you're not in the office, there's a lot of communication that happens in the office just because you're sitting right next to someone, you know, and that disappears even more when you're not physically in the same space. So I love the purposefulness of saying, hey, this isn't someone I'd normally communicate with. Let's touch base. Jeremy, I was hoping you could also, I think it's similar to what Ashley was talking about here. You guys have a bit of a pod structure that I know you're trying to replicate virtually. Maybe talk us through that.
Sure. So we have our normal, like, all-encompassing customer success channel, even in regular times on Slack. But we were starting to see, with those questions, with those constant updates that people were having, a lot of noise coming through there. And then, you know, communications as me or, you know, their manager was trying to communicate down to them. A lot of that was getting lost in responses and back and forth. And what we basically realized is, you know, in our normal in-office structure, you know, our team is sitting in little pods of 4 desks, and I think they're already informally answering a lot of those questions for each other before they escalate up. So we've broken out into different squads or pods inside of Slack as well to say, hey, you guys communicate on this level with 4 or 5 of you about the things that you're seeing, about the questions that you have. Myself and our manager of CS are in each of these channels kind of monitoring as well. And as we see common trends or common points of confusion, we'll pull those out and answer them in the larger, from a sort of top down way, in our larger team channel, just so that becomes the avenue for official communication. But then they can kind of have their informal space to, you know, where you might normally just like pop your head around your computer and say, hey, really quick, remind me how to do this. That's not clouding up that full team channel. We've been doing that for about 3 or 4 days now, and it's been really successful. And I think it's also helped on the morale front, is now you've got this tighter unit of people responsible to check in on each other. Hey, how are we doing this morning? Do you guys want to hop on at the end of the day and just kind of decompress? It's not so intimidating to do that with 15, 20 people in a channel when it's, you know, 4 or 5.
Yeah, I love that. You know, we tried to do our first remote happy hour, and overall it was very successful. But I also, at the end of it, I was like, oh, we had too many people in one room. You know, we just weren't able to talk with each other as much. So I love the idea of a smaller group. You know, that almost like a little buddy system to check in on one another. Kris, given, you know, what your company does and your expertise on this, you know, we have some questions coming in on the channel around like, hey, there's a lot of communication internally that's happening, some of it in Slack, some of it in email. Like, how do you make sure that everybody sees the information that they need to see, that we're getting consistency? Advice you'd give on that front?
It's tough to do this without turning it into a sort of infomercial for our product, in the sense that, you know, that this is what we do, right? We're focused on that internal communication piece. And so what ends up happening is that, you know, we have a lot of different things available to us. whether it be blogs. And we find that within our organization, folks, because they're using our platform, they're using these blogs much more consistently. And even it's just little things like how to work from home, how to workouts, pictures of people's dogs, pictures of people's co-workers, that sort of thing. One of the other things that we find is we put out a section for the CEO, which has been helpful, because I think that just hearing from him on a consistent basis, or her on a consistent basis, it's just reassuring. This is what's happening. Here's what we're thinking about in terms of the business. One of the other things that we chose to do was we have these forums. So yes, we have Slack or Teams, but we have these forums within the product. We created 2 forums. One in our community site, which we created just for customers to kind of talk amongst themselves. We found that to be really interesting, because it was generating conversations that we'd never even considered. The other thing in our internal sort of forums, we created this thread, let's say, just to focus on positive feedback from customers. Because I think one of the things that's happening here is that we're just surrounded by negativity. It's you can't do this, you can't go outside, you can't go to a bar, you can't go have a restaurant or whatever. And so just by focusing on that good news, that good messages, it's helping the morale of the teams, because it's not just the CS team, but the whole wider business, because other people are starting to realize, hey, we are actually helping these people. So I think that's been well received.
Yeah, purposeful positivity really, does play a role in all of this. And Ashley, you sort of said earlier, like, control what you can control kind of thing. That's something I keep saying to myself, even, to get through this, is like, I think that the enormity of the situation makes that challenging for some people. Based on some questions I see coming in, I want to circle back around to a topic that we touched on a little bit earlier, but maybe dive into it a bit more. So it's this concept of balance between, Kris, you said it really well, like, we're all still a business. We also need revenue through this, but how do we also be generous? How do you find that balance? As you're talking to customers. So maybe just to structure this in a little bit, I think we've heard some customers report to us that their customers are almost preemptively canceling. They may not even be up for renewal for a while, but for 6 months, 9 months, but they're preemptively anxious about the situation and canceling. So I'm curious on some advice we can give around, if you have a customer who rightfully so is concerned, how can you maybe back them off, keep them engaged for a little bit longer, give them shorter, more reasonable pathways forward? So anything you guys have done with a customer that's been effective, I think we'd all benefit from hearing that. Ashley, maybe you want to kick us off there?
Sure, yeah. So we've had this program forever, since we've been in business, called the Bootstrap program. And it's really for startups, who don't have any funding, anything like that. And so the original terms were, once you were deemed profitable, then, you would just come in and hopefully just do the right thing, fully based on the honor system, and pay for your subscription. But until then, we were going to help you get to that profitable, point by giving you the sales enablement software. So what we've done is we really just spruced up that offering, and as opposed to just canceling out some of these customers who are faced with this economical impact, we're actually giving them that bootstrap option, so they're not fully gone, and hopefully we can continue to just be there for them through this time. And so the only caveat to that is that we have check-ins that are scheduled with them throughout this period. So we're not just giving you a free account and you're just going to kind of go off and hope, never, communicate with us ever again. We have a check-in scheduled, so we can hopefully just reassess and, determine if they are in a better position. But I think we've just decided as a leadership team, that's far better than them just leaving entirely and trying to win them over, in 8 months when things might be have turned around.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Jeremy, shifting to, a lot of yours are just sort of very much in hold, but you do have a side of the business that, that does like distribution and things like that, maybe aren't hit quite as hard. But then some of the questions that are coming in is, how do we make sure that if we see a decrease in usage from some that we don't think should necessarily be impacted, how do we talk to them about that change without potentially triggering a churn? So curious
Sure.
what you guys have maybe given a shot at on your side.
Yeah, I think to be perfectly honest, our focus has been these businesses that are kind of in crisis panic mode in the next month or two. We have seen some, positive response, I guess maybe not positive, but some optimistic response from some of our customers that operate in the retail space. So big box liquor stores and, to-go bottle shops and things like that, where that's always been their business model. We are getting some of that feedback from them, something that we started very early on. I mentioned one of the first things we did is just went into information gathering mode. So it was just leading on forms and survey responses. And, up to a certain point, I just, had my team start adding it into their email signature at the bottom of, hey, communicate to us how your business is being impacted by COVID-19. Fill out this quick 4-question survey, and collecting those responses, and it was very much, is your business still open? Are there plans to close it? What's the best way to be contacted at this time? Any additional notes that you have? So we're sort of passively giving them the ability to give us that direct feedback, and then responding in turn as we see. And we absolutely had folks volunteer up like, hey, actually, we're doing pretty well right now because we've always sold, alcohol out the door, and folks are stocking up. So it gave us that opportunity to, start to do that customer segmentation of, hey, we know for a fact that this customer should be okay. And then as it relates to some of the other stuff of kind of dealing with these uncertain times, frankly, something that I've challenged my team to do is it's okay. And I think we get stuck in customer success mode sometimes of like, hey, we have to know it all. But as Abby led with in this webinar today, none of us has been through a pandemic before. We're all figuring some things out. So when I tell you, you reach out to me and say, hey, I want to pause my subscription, or we say, hey, we've waived that renewal. Well, for how long? I don't know if my business is going to be up for 6 months. Hey, just being honest, I don't know either. Right now, we've pushed it 3 months. Let's check back in 3 months and see where that leaves us. And just letting them know, almost certainty around, we don't know either. We don't have the answer, but we're going to be here as a partner to communicate with you during that, I think can be a really impactful message to deliver to a customer.
For sure. Honesty goes a long way. And also, draws people to you when we feel like we're all having a shared experience. Even just like seeing people's dogs behind them and children behind them on calls like this, you feel like you're seeing this small glimpse into someone's, into someone's personal life. So love that, Jeremy. Kris, I want to pose the same question to you that I posed to Jeremy. So if we have customers who we think should still be using the system, but we think shouldn't be as heavily impacted, how have you guys approaching those customers and saying, hey, what's going on? Trying to encourage them to pick up use, do the things that you want, but without, being insensitive.
Yeah, it's, my answer there really sort of largely mirrors Jeremy in the sense that, we're going through this process, and the biggest factor in this is that it's an unknown. We just don't know how long this is going to last, and so, it is a balance. It is one that's tricky. I think that a lot of it depends. I would look at it in terms of, has use dropped off or has use stopped? And if use is completely stopped, it's a different scenario, right? Because certainly in our business, we're dealing with businesses that have anywhere from 50 users to 40,000, 50,000 users and more on a monthly basis. And so we're looking at that and going, well, if it's dropped to zero, something catastrophic has happened within the business. That's a different, we're going to communicate that. We're going to communicate with these folks differently. If it's that, where we're still seeing this usage, we're still seeing some degree of usage, we're then going in and analyzing it and saying, well, where are they using it? And then how can we help them in those sort of specific areas improve that experience? So, as an example, one of the things that we can see within our application is what do people search for? And so, guess what? People are searching for COVID-19, but they're also searching for other things like information on paychecks or HR information, things like that that normally isn't maybe in the top 10 things has suddenly jumped up. So we're going in and saying to these folks, here's how you can maybe change the site, or here's how you can maybe change the business. And again, it all ties around to, you hit the nail on the head earlier, where we're not just calling to check in, we're not just calling to see how you're doing, we're calling you with, hey, we've noticed this thing's happening, and we think that there's a way you can improve this experience for your users. If everybody just stopped using it, then it's a little bit different conversation.
Yeah, definitely using the data in front of you is so critical in a time like this. Where you have data gaps, I love that, Jeremy's team has taken the extra step of asking, trying to get people to volunteer some information. If you end up on the phone with a customer and you don't know, I've been telling my CSMs, ask. Ask them to tell you what's happening. Let's not assume we know everything about them from the data, but where we can make some very educated stances based on the data we have about them. I think that's really smart, Kris. I'm also curious, Kris, because you mentioned you guys pivoted on your roadmap a little bit, and you're going to be, releasing a feature that you think will be helpful to your customers during this time. Curious your quick thoughts on, how do you talk to customers about something as, let's call it as business as usual as a new feature, given, there's so much unusual things to talk about. How are you guys going to balance that?
It's an excellent question. It was actually the call before I got on here was actually about how do we do that. One of the things, and I mean this is basic stuff, right? But one of the things that we've tried to do with releasing these new features is to get out of the mindset of it's just another feature release, and we've sort of tried to put themes around it. So again, we're in this sort of crisis communication space. One of the things that we're doing within our community is, yes, this is COVID-19 is a specific crisis right now, but how do we then build this so that we have this sort of, on the one hand, we have these resources that are going to be useful for crisis communication in any future scenario. The world has changed whether we like it or not, and so that's one side of it. And then how do we get these point in time communications? So we're using the blogs for that, and it's constantly refreshed content. But from a basic standpoint, it's how do we, when we do these webinars or when we do these releases, how do we tie this into a story and we tell these people, here are the things that we're doing, and here's how it benefits you. Here's how it helps you. Because, yes, I think we're seeing it in society today, where everybody's kind of trying to come together and everybody's just trying to get through this. But because of the nature of this is just so unusual. I just think we have to put ourselves in the mindset of these individual users and say, what are they thinking? And most of these people are thinking, how am I going to pay my bills at the end of the month? How am I going to, am I still going to have a job? And if you can help them, help their business, and you can communicate that in a way that, encourages them to come to things like this, or, the feature launches of whatever it is, then you're going to be better for it, and they're going to be better for it at the end of it.
I love it. And I unfortunately just noticed our time. I feel like we could keep going for a while yet. I want to maybe end us for today, at least, by first saying a huge thank you again, Ashley, Jeremy, Kris. We really appreciate you being willing to come and talk to us about where you're at, being brave and saying, hey, this is what we're trying. This is what's working. This is what's not. I'm very proud that we have a community of customers that is willing to share this type of information and be supportive of one another. We're going to be continuing on the Churn Zero side to look for opportunities to do things like this to help you guys learn from one another and support one another through this time. So thank you to everybody that came today. Thank you to the three of you for your thoughts, and I hope everyone stays safe and healthy, please.
Thank you.
And we'll go ahead and close. Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks, everybody.